These are devotions for people at a social distance. We are living in times when people are looking for salvation from many things, and one of the things that people are looking to be saved from is a deadly pandemic, and there are certain things that are happening that are making people very frightening and looking for salvation, and and there is nothing wrong with this, turning to God, looking for hope of salvation. And I do have issues, of course, with people who say, I want to trust in God only and not listen to scientists or not take vaccines or take other measures. But to turn to God in itself is obviously, I believe, a good impulse. And how do we work that out? How do we hold those two things in tension? Well, this morning I was reading in my devotions in the sixth chapter of Judges, which is the beginning of the story of Gideon. But it begins, before we get into Gideon, by just a description of the crisis of the time. And the crisis of the time is it's called the Midianite oppression. And as it describes how the land of Israel is disrupted by the Midianites. And it doesn't seem to be, if you read sort of carefully what is being described, it doesn't seem to be like, they're coming and set battles and defeating the Israelites. It more seems like they are coming in and they're raiding and they are bringing they're hurting animals and they're eating up the crops and they're stealing seeds and they're stealing foods, and this creates an understandable crisis as the people lack in food and the economy spirals out of control, and it's a real crisis. And so in many ways, it sort of reminds me what we've been living through. This external thing, this virus has come in and it's disrupted just about everything about our lives. Jobs have been disrupted. The economy has certainly been disrupted, supply lines and all of that. And we look for hope and we look for help. And so the people, it says in verse 7, cry out to the Lord on account of the Midianites. And what does the Lord do? Well, the Lord sends a prophet. And basically, the message of the prophet is this. This is what God has done for you. The Lord led you out of Egypt. He led you out of slavery, delivered you from the Egypts, brought you up here. And he just said, God just had one thing, asked for one thing of you. He said, reject the false gods. And says, it ends by saying, but you have not given heed to my voice. So I asked you to do one thing, you didn't do it. And if you had done one thing, the implication is you would not be facing this crisis. So, what does this mean? It means, yes, turn to God. Turn to God in times of trial and trouble, but do not neglect to do the things that will help you in your case. Do not do not embrace falsehood, but rather embrace the truth of your situation, which means, in our case, I would say, absolutely listen to science, listen to those who are telling us, and vaccines make this huge difference, that masking and social distancing based on the situation, are very necessary and helpful. And then we turn to God. It's sort of, we come to God and say, God, save me from this pandemic, save me from this disease. And God says, well, I sent you a vaccine. I sent you guidelines, through wise people about how you're to do. Have you done those things? And we say, no, God, we just want you to save us. Well, that's a rather foolish thing to do. And so all of this, the story of the Midianites and the Israelites, made me think of our situation. And it's kind of amazing how these kinds of things keep on happening. When you embrace falsehood, salvation is not going to be at hand. Let's embrace truth. Gracious God, help us all as a society together to embrace what is true and right and good for the whole community. Amen.